Welcome, everybody. Get a few people jumping in the chat real quick. Let me know if everything's working. Audio's good, video's good. I already see a lot of you guys jumping in here in the early part of the day. We got some people. There is nothing to be bullish about. Stocks are done. Crypto is done. A little bit of bearish sentiment today. Obviously, the market's down, but we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about the job report that came out that caused the stock market to sell off. And then we're going to be jumping into talking about the potential of a rate hike, not coming next month, but the month after in September. Then we're going to kind of map out not only Bitcoin, the stock market, the US dollar index. We're going to look at everything. So come in here, jump in. Let's see. Crypto 7, what's up, my brother? It's good to see you in here. I was over on his channel probably about a couple months ago. He's a really great guy. Appreciate you having you in here, my friend. Hello from Portugal. What's up, Warren? I love your hair and glasses. That's dope. Portugal seems to be a really popular place. A lot of people are moving. Good laws. I don't know quite as much about the taxes, but I do know a few crypto people that have recently moved there. Yo, what's up, Steven? It's good to see you. Alvin, what's up, my friends? J Freak, shout out. Good to see you back here again. I don't think you've missed a stream so far. Short squeeze to the downside, then up. Yes, sir. Let's hope so. I'm not too worried about it. I do anticipate a rate hike coming. Obviously we could still see a little bit more downside, but for the most part, we had such a huge run to start this cycle that a cool off period isn't to be unexpected. And, it's just chopping a lot of people up. But honestly, I'm not too worried about it realistically. We're going to go through the charts and I'm going to share with you guys exactly what's going on. Let's see here. Alrighty, guys, let's jump into some data. What is causing the sell-off? Well, let's go right over here. Let me share my screen. If I can, it's not showing up for some reason. Oh, there it is. Okay. So right off the bat, the U.S. added jobs fewer than expected, 114,000. Unemployment jumped. And if we come down here, the unemployment rate jumped from 4.3% jumped to 4.3%, up from 4.1%. So it was higher than expectations. Anytime that happens, we always see the market react negatively. That just means the stock market, which ultimately at this point in our cycle, Bitcoin is synced up so strongly with the rest of the markets because it has such a high market cap in and of itself that it's kind of to be expected. Bitcoin is no longer kind of an outlier. It's going to continue to follow the risk on markets. S&P 500 seems to be what it's most correlated to. So if we come over, we can look at another chart that I wanted to share with you guys. And that's going to be right here. And this is going to be the most important thing in my opinion. Let me refresh this real quick, make sure the data is current, because I don't know if it is. I watched it change once before I started this video. Yeah, so it's already changed a little bit. So it's looking like there's about, and this changed. One time this was 80% when the market was at its peak sell-off earlier today when we woke up a couple hours ago. And then 29.5%. So basically what this chart represents, this is the potentiality of a rate hike coming, or not a rate hike, a decrease in the rate happening sometime in September. And then this is the probability of us actually having another increase. So as you guys can see, this was an 80%. This was a 20% earlier today. But as the markets bounced a little bit, fears have kind of, lifted slightly. So it's projecting that there's a 30% chance that the rate is going to continue to increase. And then there's actually a higher chance, 70%, which we're going to see how this updates. We still have a little while to go. But it's looking at about a 70% chance of a decrease. So that's going to be the most bullish thing. If we can get a cut in the rates, at that point, we're going to end up seeing crypto fly. That's to me what the most important thing we've been watching for is. And I don't think we have much more time. If we come over and actually take a look at the stock market, I do believe that that's what's going to be the early indication of either of these scenarios. So if we come over here and take a look at the SPX, we're going to come to a weekly time frame. So with the SPX, a lot of people, I saw some comments earlier, which let me show one real quick. This comment, there is nothing to be bullish about stocks are done. Crypto is done. So that comment, let's see. Stocks are bleeding. All-time high is in. We are done. So I wanted to talk a little bit about these comments because at the end of the day, when we're zooming out here, the S&P 500 quite literally just made a new all-time high. And so these type of pullbacks are completely normal. I mean, we just had an absolutely massive move. Crypto lagged throughout that entire period as the stock market was going into a new all-time high. But the facts of the matter is the stock market is very strong. And you can't really fight the trend. I mean, if we zoom out here, why would you try and call a top on that? That's my thoughts. I mean, at the end of the day, it's really easy to get super emotional in the time where the markets are selling off, when we've been through a 4-month, 5-month correction, depending on where you're drawing it. And it's really easy to get, too worried and caught up in the moment of what is taking place in the shorter time frames. But when we're zooming out, going to a monthly time frame, it's just, you don't want to be calling a top right here. That's just my opinion, because it's not going to work out in the same ways that everybody throughout the entire history of time has been saying, oh, this time is different. This time is different. Oh, this time's different. Oh, it's actually different here. Oh, no. It's different right here, though. That's what we have to be aware of. So that's just my opinion, guys. At the end of the day, we can still come down a little bit lower when we're looking at the stock market. Do not get me wrong. I'm not saying that we're bullish right off this very level. However, one of the things that's important to note, we are approaching support. We've we've almost tagged it, not entirely, but if I had to guess, I wouldn't be surprised if we still have to go through a little bit of a correction. Maybe we get a short-term bounce off this level, come back up to the 5,420 level, and then we could end up seeing one final retest, gather liquidity back down inside of this prior range that we were holding, leading into this most recent breakout. And then from there, that's where we'd be expecting to see some type of reversal. I'm not going to be surprised to see that. If the stock market's to bleed for one more low, if we come over and actually take a look at Bitcoin, it's going to give us a little bit of a different story. And so I wanted to map out what we're seeing over there real quick. So with Bitcoin, this is a scenario that I talked a lot about. We were mapping out this Wyckoff for a significant period of time, all the way into, really, we called the Wyckoff when we were first starting to reverse back up in here. When we had this inverse head and shoulder forming, I drew the potential of either this being the Wyckoff, or if we were to have a further, downside continuation, then at that point we were looking for one more spring-loaded bounce. And once we actually started to lose support up here at 67K, that was where I called for the inevitable point where we would have that third and final spring-loaded bounce. And that's what we ended up happening. Now, we have already retested the range highs. That was something that we were talking about when we were all the way back down in here. I said how we're probably going to run back up to those range highs. And after that, you're going to have one of two scenarios. Either you're going to have that breakout like that, which happens in Wyckoffs, or we would have another reaccumulation pattern where we kind of come back down to this mid-range, consolidate here for a little while before we start that next cycle. This is something we've talked a lot about for a significant amount of months, really the last 2-3 months at this point. So having it happen is not to be unexpected. I don't think anybody should be freaking out, considering when we're zooming out, looking at a weekly, we're still consolidating all the way up here at these prior range highs. Nothing has really changed that much. If we're looking at our support levels, looking at candle bodies from the 65K top, we still have a little ways to come back down a little lower before we even hit that main support. So there's still a potential where we have a little bit more downside to come before this is over. And that's what we have to be paying attention for. Realistically, I'm not going to be surprised if we come down here, make a short-term bounce, and then we still could end up dragging lower. And this entire move is just going to end up being kind of your typical A, B, and a C correction. We've already seen our impulse off of the lows. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That was 5 waves up. And now every 5-wave rise is going to have an ABC type correction. How, that goes totally depends on the market. But as of right now, I still believe that we're inside of this wave A. Once we get this most recent bounce, which is probably going to come fairly soon, in my opinion, because when we're looking at the stock market, it's also approaching support. So I do believe it's going to bounce. But if we were to see a short-term bounce, Bitcoin's probably going to run back up near these range highs around 67K. And then I'm not going to be surprised if we end up seeing one more final correction back down, taking us all the way back down to that same, almost the low end of our last range. When we're looking at where we kind of bottomed before our most recent rise, what we ended up bottoming at was right at that 60K level. That was where our inverse head and shoulder was forming. And I'm not going to be surprised if we come back down and end up retesting that same level once more. So this is what I'm mapping out for Bitcoin. This is what I see in Bitcoin. I don't think we're out of the clear quite yet. Altcoins will bleed during this period, especially if we get a lower high and another lower low from Bitcoin. But realistically, Bitcoin's still just completing impulse waves. This was a clear impulse after our Wyckoff accumulation, us to come back down to the same mid-range point of our consolidation before we kind of do something like this. I'm not going to be the least bit surprised to see that. It's going to shake out a lot of weak hands, but at the end of the day, the market is still ultimately bullish. So that's why I'm not freaking out too much. Hopefully you guys understand what I'm talking about. Let's see some more comments in here. How deep can we go? Well, pretty much answered that one. BTC will break below 60K next 1 hour. Let's see. It's necessary to have those negative comments at this stage. Yeah, man, agreed. 100%. I mean, anytime you correct for 4 months, sentiment's going to be low. Altcoins as a whole have dragged low in this entire cycle, aside from like maybe some niche narratives like meme coins, some of the other altcoins. But for the most part, it's mainly just been meme coins. So, it makes sense why we're going to see this type of price action, why we're going to have this type of bearish sentiment. But at the end of the day, all of that shifts the second the Bitcoin flips bullish. You're going to see all of the people that were bearish rotate back in, buying at highs. And it's just, there's really no point considering stock market's breaking out and going into new all-time highs. Now that we're talking about actually getting a rate cut for the first time this cycle, that's going to be the most bullish thing that could possibly happen for crypto. And so looking at having a very bullish election between candidates that are pivoting pro-crypto, having the potential of a rate cut coming sometime in September, I think that September, October, November leading into that election could be a very profitable time. Bitcoin finally goes into a new all-time high. Altcoins start their process of going up. And, maybe we have, most likely, I would expect to see some type of cool-off period after the election. Buy the rumor, sell the news. Depending on who gets elected, we don't really know yet. But if both of the candidates are pivoting pro-crypto, I don't think it really matters so much who gets elected. We're going to see a rally going into the election. And I really think that that's going to be fueled around the rate cuts. That's what we need to see if we're going to see the market reverse and start going back up again. Let's see. I literally live in Utah, you idiot. I've been in Utah for a long time. Hello from Woke Tax Hell, Denmark. Your Friday live streams are booked in my calendar. Are you booked for your hernia repair? Yep, I go into surgery on the 8th. So 6 days actually. Then I'm going to go in and get that done. Speaking of which, the lady still hasn't even called me to go over surgery details on what I can and can't eat and at what time and stuff like that. So I'm going to have to give them a call to make sure that works out. But yeah, everything's booked. I'm good. I'm not in pain, not struggling by any means. Just going to go get it fixed so I can go back to working out, because that was what I'm missing most over the last couple months, honestly. How can a left translated cycle impact altcoins? Seems like we should be rooting for a right translated. Yeah, I mean, we should definitely be rooting for a right translated cycle for sure, considering that's going to give us a cycle top sometime at the end of 2025. And we want the cycle to run as long as it's possibly going to. If we were to see a left translation in Bitcoin, I think that there will be a rotation into the altcoins, but it's just going to be a very short-lived one, and it'll be similar in the last cycle where they ran for maybe like 100 days, maybe like 150 days max, and then that's going to lead to the cycle top. And last cycle wasn't a left-translated cycle, so it would probably happen in an even shorter period of time, maybe only like 3 months or so. So we could be looking at that kind of playing out this cycle, depending on what happens. But the fact is, like, we've been correcting inside of this consolidation for a long time. 4 months, getting closer to the month 5. That's a long time that's putting us right into the same trajectories as prior right translated cycles. So it's kind of right there at that final point where I'm personally leaning towards a right translation, especially because we have all of this fundamental drivers and narratives behind the election. Whether Trump gets elected, whether Kamala gets elected, it doesn't really change anything. Both of them are pro-crypto. And so at that point, I'm expecting the year of 2025 to be very bullish as a whole. So if we have a nice big run going into this election, we get the rate cut taking place sometime in September, which the numbers are projecting that that's the most likely scenario, then at that point, we should see September, October, November as being pretty bullish times leading into that election. And we could see 3 months of really big upside potential. Buy the rumor, sell the news. Oh, who's going to get elected? They're pro crypto, Trump, 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 all of this stuff. And then, after the election, we'll probably see a sell off and another cool down period. If we were to see something like that, which let me just jump into the chart real quick and I can kind of map it out a little bit. So if we're zooming out here, let's draw a line. Let me see the exact day, because I don't know when it is. Is there a day for the election? Do you guys know what it is? I just heard November. Just drop it in the comments if you guys know the exact day that the election is going to be taking place, because I don't know. But let's just assume November. Let's jump into the chart and zoom out here. And let's go September, October, November. We'll go to the end of November here. Right there. So what I wouldn't be surprised to see, Bitcoin pulls back down in here. We see another lower low. We just kind of go sideways. But then we see a pretty big impulse all the way upwards of about 100K per Bitcoin leading into that election. In that period, we'd see Bitcoin cool off shortly after. It's a buy the rumor, sell the news type of event where everybody's anticipating a pro crypto president for the first time. Everybody buys that rumor, and then after whichever one gets elected, even if it's Trump that gets elected as bullish as he's been on crypto, I still think that we'll see a cool down period. I don't think who wins has any impact on that whatsoever. However, once we do get to that point, we see a pullback. We see that cool down period like I talked about. And I'm not going to be surprised to see this type of price action, considering it's very typical inside of bull markets. When you're breaking out, you're making these impulses, having these quick pullbacks. It's very similar to the price action we saw in 2017, where in 2017, we consolidated and made higher highs and higher lows literally the entire way up the trend. This was the only time in which we kind of didn't do that, but we still were pretty much following along with that same pattern. Once we started really breaking out and getting very bullish in a price discovery, we did the same things. Quick impulses, quick pullbacks, until we led into some type of blow off top rally. So for this cycle, if we have a fundamental driver going into this election, this cycle's already, in my opinion, going to just consolidate before we get that higher high. At that point, we make a big run upwards of 100K. We see that pullback back down, retesting these prior highs that we've been at. And then, maybe we're talking the beginning of 2025. Maybe it's the early spring of 2025 that we really start to see that next big reversal. I'm not going to be surprised to see that type of price action, considering it's very much on par with anything that we've seen up to this point. Seeing something along the lines of this leading into a cycle top at the end of 2025 makes the most logical sense if we're going to follow a normal right translated cycle. We have these rate cuts. I think that that's what's ultimately going to fuel people's bullish sentiment. And then you're going to have the rumor of the election coming up. People are going to buy that rumor, anticipating a pro crypto president. And that's what should fuel this next leg up higher. That's what I'm anticipating. Obviously, we don't know for sure, but that's the way it's kind of lining up. So that's why I'm not too worried about it. It just makes more sense that the way the cycle's playing out up to this point, because we're looking at 2025 being such a pivotal year for the first time we've actually had institutional development. We've also had candidates in the presidency that are pivoting pro-crypto. At that point, then I really think that 2025 has all of the reasons to be a very, very big year, which if that's the case, it's going to follow that right translated cycle. So that's what my opinion is looking at it. We are about to leg up massively. Amen. I would like to see that. Don't be surprised if we take a little bit of time reconsolidating, though, before we get that leg up. Let's see. With all due respect, who has been keeping crypto down? The effing left. Well, the truth of the matter is the left has been very much anti-crypto up to this point. Gary Gensler, Biden, all these big crypto companies and exchanges. Brian Armstrong got sued by the SEC. The Winklevoss twins have voiced frustration around some of the things that they're trying to streamline that keeps getting shut down. And they know that if they were to try and do it, that they would also just get sued. So they've purposely not done those things just to, avoid that mess. So realistically, they've been very much anti-crypto up to this point. And that's why I think Kamala Harris had no choice but to pivot pro crypto. When we're talking 4 months before she has to go in there and run against arguably one of the most popular people in the entire world, not just presidents, she has 4 months to campaign, and nobody really even knows who she is. And realistically, nobody even in the Democratic Party liked her that much. So she doesn't really have a choice but to try and get as many of those votes as she possibly can. And so that's kind of what I think is going to be taking place with her pivoting pro crypto. Who knows what she's actually going to do if she were to get elected, whether she actually streamlines adoption or what. But at this point, she kind of has to, because I just don't think that she has that many resources to get new votes unless she kind of pivots pro crypto, especially when you have somebody like Trump that has just gone so bullish on it, already launching NFTs. He just announced Bitcoin sneakers. I don't even know what that means. If they're on the blockchain, probably not. They're just Bitcoin sneakers. But it's all of these kind of things that I think are going to ultimately be narratives to watch for, drivers of value this cycle, because we're always looking for the narratives. If we're going to look at narratives, we have to look at what the most vital ones are this cycle. And this cycle has so many of them, which is why I've always said this is the super cycle. Altcoins have historically never really done that much until Bitcoin gets into a new all-time high. But once Bitcoin does that, that's when we see the big rotation back into the markets come in. So I'm expecting a lot of the same things, considering, altcoins haven't done anything. We're still below prior all-time highs, but we should expect that once things really start heating up, that's where we're going to look at a lot of that rotation taking place. We have the institutions. The institutions aren't here to, pump it just to the prior all-time high and sell everything for a small gain. They're going to drive the value of these things. You're going to hear about it all over the mainstream news. All of their big mainstream news buddies are going to pump the crap out of it. And then from that point, they're going to have enough exit liquidity with retail to take all of their profit. And so we're, quite a ways away from that point, in my opinion. We just have to kind of get to that point, being probably 2025 being a very, very, powerful year as a whole. Do you ever look at Caspa? Yeah, I do look at Caspa, but the market cap's pretty high, so I'm not interested in it personally. That's just, I didn't get in early like some of the other people I know that did, and I'm not one to really try and focus too much on the higher market cap cryptos. It just doesn't make as much sense. But let's come over here and look at some altcoins. Let's see here. Yeah, actually, do you guys have any recommendations? I can jump into those right now if you do want anything to be covered. Let's see here. And if you do, I'm going to have to just rotate back and forth between different charting software and services. But if you guys have any altcoins you want covered, drop them in the comments. I'll go through and actually analyze them. Let's see. A couple I wanted to cover personally. I'm going to actually change where we're at real quick. So let's come over here. So the first one is going to be Metis DAO, obviously. I love me some Metis. But all of these are providing great entries during this dip. And I don't think that they're going to last forever. All of these new cycles that are starting look extremely bullish. Everything's still holding bullish structure. Nothing has really changed realistically. And a lot of these are going to be setting up for some pretty big moves. I just wouldn't be surprised if this ends up taking one more low before we get that reversal. Because what we're looking at, all of these just finished their very first little cycles. 5 waves up, and we're currently inside of our first corrective phase this entire cycle. So Metis, it's going to have 5 waves to the downside in this C leg. So we're looking at 1, 3, and I do believe that this is an extended wave 5. And we're just working on probably our last capitulation before that's over. And so if I was watching Metis, this one is for sure one of my favorite investments. Been holding it all the way since back down in here at the end of 2022. And I'm expecting that this one is going to perform really, really well. The reason we haven't seen so much altcoin, explosion, I guess, is just mainly because Bitcoin's still at a prior all-time high. We haven't gone into price discovery. And if we're looking at those prior cycles, that was really kind of the staple that we needed to see, was Bitcoin going into a new all-time high. And I'll map that out right here. If we remove these drawing tools and we look at the total market cap of those altcoins right here, and we could also pull up 3 charts. Drag this one up, drag this one up, If we could also come over here. Let's see. Bitcoin dominance. Yeah, we'll keep the Bitcoin dominance up here. So in the last cycle, what we were mainly looking at, and even all the way back into 2017, but we have more price history to go off of and data from our last cycle. So when we're looking at Bitcoin going into a new all-time high, right at the point of us doing that, we were right over in here. The altcoins had just only made a breakout past their bear market lows. That was right here. So we had just started that uptrend. We were still 50% below that prior all-time high. So when we're looking at altcoins today, we're pretty much at that same point, from the high to where we're at, 40, 50% approximately. So we still have a ways to go before we're ever at that new all-time high level, right? Now, when we're looking at Bitcoin, it's at that prior all-time high, about to go into a new all-time high. We look down here at Bitcoin dominance, and it's looking super, super strong inside of this move. It's going to be interesting to see how this all factors because we're right at that major downtrending resistance. But we've talked about the potential where this does make one final kind of capitulation or run, I guess you could say, depending on how you're looking at it, before we ended up finally breaking down. But the thing is, when we're looking at all of these, it's to be expected that we're going to continue to lag Bitcoin until Bitcoin finally starts to run. It was Bitcoin running from 18K all the way to 42K and making that move. And it was at the top of that when Bitcoin correct about 20, 30%. The altcoins broke out during that dip when it topped. And then the altcoins outperformed Bitcoin on that next big run all the way up, getting close to that 60K mark. So the altcoins really waited a long time before they got to the point of breaking out. And if we're comparing anything from this current cycle, I don't think that we're that far off as far as differences and similarities. I'm not going to be surprised to see Bitcoin make this run to 100K. And then who knows, maybe it happens just like the last cycle did. Maybe we start outperforming when Bitcoin goes into a new all-time high. Every cycle is different, so we don't truly know how it's going to play out. But if it followed what happened in the last cycle, we'd be looking at Bitcoin being at about 100K. And then it would be at the top of that move, talking about the election year, us running super hard with the rate cuts happening in September, us running with the election taking place in November. Bitcoin runs up to 100K. And then when we get that top to come back down and retest that prior high, maybe we follow like what we did in the last cycle, where that's the moment where these altcoins finally start to really get liftoff into price discovery. I'm not going to be surprised to see that. But the truth of the matter that I think is playing out is once Bitcoin finishes that run to 100K and pulls back, and we start actually making that next impulse, that secondary impulse is where I think that the real outperformance is going to happen inside of the altcoins. Because at that point, Bitcoin's already gone into a new all-time high. It's already had its first correction into a new all-time high. And it's always at that moment that the altcoins are going to end up outperforming because Bitcoin money is going to be rotating back into those markets. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Bitcoin dominance factors into all of this. We are sitting right at that major downtrending resistance on the log. But when we're looking in here, this is looking super bullish, like we will make one more final push. And this could be, similar to that last cycle where we kind of were consolidating in this downtrend. Everything was looking really solid. And then Bitcoin made one final bull trap to complete that impulse. And then that was led us into our first alt season. So we could be seeing something similar. Maybe Bitcoin rips upwards of 60% or more. It's hard to say, really. We're just going to have to watch and see what the market ultimately ends up doing, how the stock market bottoms, how we reverse here. But, expect a couple more months of kind of sideways because at the end of the day, we still are in a long-term cycle, especially if we're talking at a cycle top taking place sometime at the end of, 2025. Let's see here. Oh, yeah, Dogecoin. I'll look at that for you. So Dogecoin, let's jump into a shorter time frame and take a peek here. Dogecoin also had an impulse, 1, 3, 5 up. This does look like a pretty typical A, B, and a C correction. So we're going to watch and see what happens. But I wouldn't be surprised if Dogecoin is going to find some type of bottom in here and start reversing. Worst case scenario is we see a little bit of a bounce in here with Bitcoin. We come back up to this 13-cent resistance. and then we reject and kind of make one more final, whether it's a double bottom retest or whether we kind of peak for one more low like that. This is the two scenarios that I see for Bitcoin. Either this will be a failed impulse and then lead us into some type of further correction, whether that's a double bottom or another lower low, or this is already kind of getting at that bottoming point before it starts reversing. That's what is, the charts are looking like at the very least, because when I'm looking at Dogecoin, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a first impulse, because this was a very obvious A, B, and a C down. It's still possible that we could make one more lower low before that wave sees over, but it does see, or I do see the potential of that already being completed. And we do have our 5-wave rise from this most recent move. Wave 1, wave 3, wave 4, and wave 5. So we've already seen our first impulse. We've already seen the potential of that ABC being done. And now, having a subwave count right down in here, it does at least show the potential that we could be at that reversal, but it doesn't really change anything. Even if we made a lower low, this is still just going to be our first little subwave to begin the cycle. And I really do believe that the next impulse coming is going to be taking us all the way up here to about 36 cents, pull back, and we'll be making a bigger push all the way back up to those prior range highs. These are just subwave counts, though, is the thing. Like, I do firmly believe Dogecoin will go into a new all-time high. And I like the Dogecoin chart because it looks a lot like 2015 Bitcoin. When Bitcoin made that big double bottom formation in 2015 and the beginning of 2016, it looks just like that. So I'm thinking that we're going to actually have a brand new all-time high, and Dogecoin will perform, and it'll be kind of the staple of the meme coins like it always has been. So that's, to me, what is the most important thing to be factoring as we're in the early portion of this cycle. You can't really expect a heck of a lot. There are going to be certain outliers, but what I always tell people is the best thing to do is have your positions ready and packed and just be looking to maximize the long-term trend, because altcoins, historically speaking, haven't really done a heck of a lot. Leading into Bitcoin going into a new all-time high, generally they've lagged quite a bit. So to see altcoins, at least some of them breaking out, some of them starting to impulse, I do think that we're pretty much right at those same trajectories as prior cycles. Not a lot has changed overall. Can you analyze Darwinian network? Ring. Yes, I can do that. Let's go and look at a different charting tool. Right here. So if we come out and look at this, it's getting absolutely demolished, but we have an impulse down in here. So that's at least a bullish sign. Wave 1, wave 3, wave 4, and 5 waves up. And I do believe that we're inside of that ABC correction right now. We'll probably come back down just a little bit lower. I wouldn't be surprised to see us back down around this wave 1 and wave 2. But for the most part, this does have the potential of this being our first impulse. And there is volume that came in here, new volume, which is what you want to see. We don't want to see this thing go for another lower low. But there are some altcoins that have, like, for example, Ape token. I think it's this one. I don't know for sure. Yeah, it's this one. So this is like the Basie thing. And it kind of did an example of this where it makes a lower low, where it looks like it's making an impulse all the way up. However, we actually just end up going into a lower low in the C wave. So that's not an impulse. That would just be your typical A, B, and a C back up. Retested that prior breakdown point as resistance, and then we get another lower low. So that could be a potential that we end up seeing inside of Darwinia if we were to go for a lower low. But we want to see that C wave kind of hold back down in here as new support. And I think that as long as Bitcoin can end up reversing fairly soon, it should end up following it. ApeCoin is trash. Yeah, honestly, Basie has really fallen off a cliff. They got flipped by the pudgy penguin. So really, NFTs as a whole are completely dead. There's almost nothing going on in that market, but we can't really expect anything to be going on in NFTs, in GameFi, in really anything on chain until Ethereum starts outperforming Bitcoin, because we haven't really done that up to this point. It's just been lagging the entire move up. Look at Flare again. Yeah, I can look at Flare. So Flare has done nothing from my last stream. Still just the same consolidation. 5 waves up. ABC back down. I think we're coming to our first support that I was drawing, where we're actually right on that support that I was looking at. So it would be nice to see it reverse right here. But we're going to have to watch and see with Bitcoin. At the end of the day, if Bitcoin starts bouncing in here, some of the altcoins are going to do the same thing. I wouldn't be surprised to see a bounce like this. However, if Bitcoin makes another lower low, these things will do the same thing, and then it'll look more like that. So these are the two scenarios that I see for it. We're either going to get an extended wave C, or we're kind of at that support for reversing right now. I don't know for sure. We're just going to watch and see how Bitcoin ends up playing out. Yo, shout out for the donation. I appreciate you, 3 Diglets. Have you looked at the XRPs today? Are you talking about the actual XRP chart? I'll go look at it real quick, because I think that's what you're referring to. Because I have not looked at it. Let's go see. XRP. So XRP pulled back from that downtrending resistance, because we were talking about the breakout of this 2400-day downtrend. And at that time, which I'm going to remove that so it's a little easier to see right here. I'm going to remove all of these real quick so it's easier to see. We were basically just sitting at a potential of a breakout, but I said how we were 4.5 days before that weekly close. So I said how we had to close the weekly outside of that downtrending resistance to confirm it. But obviously the whole market yanked back, and XRP is doing the same thing. XRP isn't pulling back very much, and it is showing strength, but it still ended up selling off with Bitcoin. So we're going to watch and see what happens with this. I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up coming down a little bit lower still. We could bounce back up to that downtrending resistance. But to see something like this, or even the potential of us coming all the way back down and kind of retesting that same trend line that we've been at, that's still a potential that we could end up see forming. But the truth is, we're just getting closer and closer to that downtrending resistance. I don't think that we're very far off from that breakout point. And I do believe that whenever that breakout point comes, we should see a pretty quick impulse all the way back up to about $2. Maybe $1.42, but I would personally anticipate us running pretty quickly up to $2. Maybe see a pullback like that before we start that next big breakout. This is more along the lines of what I'm watching for. We'll start this short-term disbelief wave, and that'll be kind of the first big breakout that we experience going into this cycle. And I don't know if that happens in 2025. I don't know if that happens, sometime leading into this year. It's really revolving around what happens with Bitcoin. If Bitcoin's going to be bullish and we're going to see a reversal sometime in September, talking about the rate cuts. If we were to see rate cuts, I think that is very bullish for crypto. We're going to definitely see a big run inside of those markets. The question is, when do the altcoins start outperforming Bitcoin? Because up to this point, they haven't done so. And for me, I'm watching Ethereum as being that leading indicator. If ETH is going to start outperforming Bitcoin, we see ETH BTC breakout. That's the point where I'm really anticipating that we're going to see altcoins as a whole, being XRP, doing kind of the same exact thing. Gari network. Yeah, we can look at that. I don't know what it is. Gari network. I'm going to look over here. So this thing honestly does not look very good, I will say. Can pull up some indicators real quick. Oh, there's the RSI. So yeah, none of our indicators are really bullish. I'm on a 3-day. If I come to like a weekly, it might change. Yeah, so our indicators are all pretty bearish overall. The weekly, the 3-day, the daily, it does have some kind of weak bullish divergence right here. It's not really that significant. So overall, all time frames are pretty much down. We just retested that range low right over in here. So I'm not going to be surprised if this thing actually makes a lower low before this is over. And you can actually see inclining volume, declining price, and that's bearish. So overall, the volume profile is bearish. The indicators, momentum indicators are bearish, and the price is bearish. So overall, I'm not really anticipating a heck of a lot. But here's the thing with altcoins like this that have kind of just been in this downtrending range for a long time. They're not going to look very good until the market reverses. And then what you're going to end up seeing is oftentimes just one big breakout impulse and do something like this, then that'll reset the whole trend. So that's more along the lines of what you're going to want to be waiting for, is to see some type of reversal. But as of now, the trend is just more or less down. Nothing is really changing of that. Corium. I can look that one up. So this has a lot of volume, and I'm not sure why. Could be an exchange listing, could be something like that. You never really know unless you're following the project. But the problem is we're seeing all of this new volume and the trend is still down. So generally when you're seeing an increase in volume and a decrease in price, that's a bearish volume profile. But we did start seeing some breakout in volume leading into this impulse. So the issue is all of this downtrending volume is showing a lot of profit taking. I don't know if there was an exchange listing over here or something like that, but sometimes that is what you can see, a big short-term pump. And then when you have a lot of this volume and the trend is down, that's actually not a very good sign. But we are technically holding a higher high. So what we would need to see for this is to see it actually truly hold this higher high. Because if we're ending up, breaking down here lower, we see a quick capitulation and do something like this, we could see this thing drag for another lower low. That's just what I'm watching for in the shorter time frames. Because keep in mind, we're still kind of at that downtrend. I wouldn't be surprised to see one more lower low inside of this, depending on how the market for Bitcoin holds. Yo, good to see you too, Diamond Hand Degenerate. Thank you for joining in on the stream today. Yo, if you guys have any more questions, comments, anything, it doesn't have to be an altcoin. It could be literally anything you guys want to see covered, talked about, any opinions that I might have on the market, whatever it is. I can tell that people are a little bit shaken by this sell-off because I'm not getting nearly the same amount of chart requests. I think everybody's a little bit, petrified of this current dump, but it's understandable, guys. I mean, it's part of the market. It's hard to stomach these ups and downs with crypto, especially when the altcoins and nothing has really moved all that much. But, at the end of the day, let's go look at Bitcoin real quick. At the end of the day, this is all just part of the game. Altcoins, historically speaking, have not done a heck of a lot until Bitcoin gets into price discovery. So if we're looking over here on the shorter time frames, Bitcoin's getting smoked. But yeah, I mean, if we're on the shorter time frames, like 5 minutes, we are making an attempt for breakout back up. This could be some type of double bottom formation where we just ended up retesting that same low. But what we would have to see for that is Bitcoin regain this entire level back up and then actually make a flip all the way back above our range high, basically being 65.6K. This is our bullish scenario for Bitcoin. We would have to see a double bottom. If we were to see Bitcoin run all the way back up and reclaim where we had just dumped from in this sell-off to open the market, then this entire move on the higher time frames would be a bullish pin hammer candle, which is a really solid reversal candle. Even if we came back down and kind of reconsolidated back down into this range, it's still going to be a bullish pin hammer candle, because in a pin hammer candle, basically what you have, I'm going to try and draw it real quick. You have the candle body right there, and then you'd have a wick above and a big wick below, and it would look like this. So this is a bullish pin hammer, and the reason why it's called that is because it looks kind of like a hammer, right? So if we were to see Bitcoin make a run all the way back up to this range high, this green box would look like this. It would have this big or this short little green body, and then it would have this really long type of a wick because we had just regained all of this sell-off. This is what creates that wick. And so then if we were to pull back to the mid-range point, that's where this kind of drops back down a little bit and does something like this. You want to have a little bit of a wick at the top because that shows that it's actually more bullish than anything. A lot of people assume that it's more bullish if it looks like this, but that's not really the case with the pin hammer candle. The more bullish it is basically has to do with the wick being at the top. So we want to see something like that. And that would be the most bullish scenario for Bitcoin up to this point. And then if we were to get, confirmation where we get another green candle doing something like that, then at that point, that would be us kind of breaking back above this range high at 65.6. And then if we could do that, that confirms the double bottom reversal. So it doesn't have, just because we have a double bottom doesn't necessarily mean that it has to go all the way back up into a new high or anything. It would just look like this. Low, low. We could bounce back up to like 67K. But then if we were to see one more final lower low to kind of complete this ABC correction, which I'm not going to be the least bit surprised to see, we would probably come all the way back down to like 60K or so, maybe high 59, mid 59 to 60K. That's kind of what I'd be watching for Bitcoin from this point on. Something along the lines of this, but I'm not going to be surprised if we see a bounce somewhere right in here, because this is kind of the level that I was watching for a bounce anyways. So I'm just going to kind of be sticking to the same thesis up to this point. Not sure if you noticed, but it's not corrective selling, it's impulsive selling, which means the trend reversal, sir. I mean, realistically, we just had a 5-wave rise, so I'm not sure if that's what you would call impulsive selling. I mean, in the short term, yeah, it's impulsive selling, but like I just mapped out, that's pretty typical inside of an ABC correction. So XLM will be insane. Let's go take a peek real quick. We can take a look at XLM. I don't know which one's going to have the full price history, though. That's always the issue with these stupid charts. We're going to go to a different charting place, and I'll share with you guys. Good old stellar lumens. Actually, this is a good thing to talk about. I had a call with a buddy, and he wanted me to go over his portfolio and do kind of a portfolio consultation. And I talked a lot about this as far as like potentials that we could see for how to take profits and things like that. Speaking of which, if you guys do want to end up having a portfolio consultation, I do offer those. You just have to email me, reach out to me on Telegram, reach out to me on Twitter, however you have to do so. My email, I'll post it inside of the comments real quick. So that's my email for anybody that wants to know. But if you guys want me to go over your portfolio, look at things, give you my opinions on altcoins you're holding or anything like that, you can reach out to me through email and we can set something like that up. But it was in one of those calls that I just did where I was kind of mapping out stellar lumens as an example. And the reason I was talking about stellar lumens is because this is the kind of path that altcoins are going to follow. If you're holding any of the best performing altcoins in a cycle, the ones that are going to get adoption, they're going to follow this exact path. And I'll give you an example from this cycle being all the way back in 2017. And I'll give you a new example from our last cycle, with which were altcoins that I also ended up buying in early too. So stellar lumens, it went down and sideways for a long time, doing virtually nothing. You wouldn't have made any money in here unless you were swing trading the highs and the lows. But realistically, that's not where the real money in crypto is made. It was doing absolutely nothing until once Bitcoin went into new all-time highs for the first time that cycle, made that first breakout from $1,000 to $3,000 to go into that new all-time high. That stellar lumens did this, had an absolutely massive run to start that run. Now, what we have historically had after we make that first big breakout to start the cycle, once Bitcoin goes into price discovery, we always see a cool off period where the market's correct 60, 70, 80+%, like it did right here. I don't know exactly what that was, but from the peak all the way down. So this one was almost 90%, 88% that this thing corrected. And then it went up like 50x inside of its next impulse. This is the path that many altcoins are going to follow. And another example of this would have been Phantom Network. This was an altcoin that I got into early in the last cycle. I bought it at that green line right here. And it did the exact same thing where it's kind of just trending sideways, not doing a heck of a lot. But once Bitcoin went into price discovery and we got that first big breakout, we ended up seeing Phantom make this insane move. And I sold the majority of my position at a 20x right here. And then I sold the rest at a 40x, which was over in this period. And then it ended up going into another high after that. So I would have made more money just continuing to hold to the trend. Quite literally, I would have made tens of millions of dollars. Off of Phantom, maybe only like 5 to 10 million. But the thing was that I was holding Phantom. I was holding Solana. I bought Solana at 60 cents. I bought Terra Luna at 32 cents, like the exact bottom almost. And so a lot of those are going to end up outperforming what you think. And it's the altcoins that do this type of stuff they follow the same path where it's once we go into that first breakout into price discovery, we make that big impulsive move into price discovery for its cycle as well. The difference is this is the first cycle for many of these altcoins, so the upside is absolutely massive. And that's what we ended up seeing over here in that last bull run. And then we always end up having that final kind of euphoric blow off top. The best altcoins will always have another higher high. That's what Phantom did. It went up absolutely massively from that point. Terra Luna was another example that did this exact same pattern. And I've seen this pattern play out so many times inside of crypto that it's insane. So I bought Terra Luna right here at 32 cents. Boom. It was at the very bottom of this retest. I didn't know anything about it. Literally, I just got lucky. Quite honest, I'm not smart or anything. I just got lucky on that one. I just follow people that I know are really smart, and that's honestly where I've been able to find a lot of altcoin picks. Just following people that are really into fundamental analysis, break things down, and then I apply that with the charts. When I saw this thing making its first little impulse, I was like, man, that looks like a really bullish setup. And sure enough, when we make that first big breakout, it did this. And I sold the majority at a 20x. And then I sold, I don't remember where 40x was, but it was somewhere inside of here, not at the exact top. I kept $10,000 left in this position that I had. It turned into $100,000 all the way up here. So once again, had I have held all of that, talking tens of millions of dollars profit. The best performing altcoins are going to do that. So what we should expect to see, we're still all the way back down here, guys. None of the altcoins have done anything. Bitcoin hasn't gone into price discovery yet. They haven't made that first big breakout into price discovery yet. We'll have that cool off period. So this is why I anticipate going into September, October, November, we see that first big upswing leading into the election. After the election, we have that cool off period where everything corrects and makes that first big sell off. And then after that cool off period, I'm expecting us to finish that final peak that we're going to get at to end that cycle. This is what, historically speaking, dating all the way back, because I've been into crypto since early 2016. I bought my first Bitcoin at $450. So it was all the way back at the beginning of that stage. I've seen quite literally all of the best altcoins follow this same, setup. The only difference is in 2017, pretty much every altcoin did that. And in the last cycle, it was only a handful of altcoins that ended up making that type of a run. However, this cycle, I think, has similarities to 2017. But then I also think that there's going to be certain outliers that end up doing this more so than others. I don't think everything is going to make this type of a move, but I think that there's going to be a higher consistency of altcoins making these type of moves in comparison to our last cycle. And so when we're looking at these, this is what I'm anticipating, right? With Terra Luna, it ended up going to zero. So that's why it just is further reason why we have to be getting out based off the 4-year cycles. We got to make sure that we're taking profits because, I made a lot of money off of Terra Luna, but realistically, had I have just held it and took profits based off the 4-year cycle rather than taking them really early into the cycle, my few $100K that I made off of this trade probably would have been worth like literally tens of millions of dollars. So that's why I say that it's a little bit tricky when we're playing these cycles because we don't always know exactly what's going to happen. We have a lot of different stimulus this cycle versus prior ones. But at the end of the day, this is what I'm anticipating because this is how I've made so much money in the markets, guys. I've watched these cycles play out over the course of going on to 9 years in the market now I've been in here. So I've seen all of the best returning altcoins follow this same pattern where once Bitcoin goes into a new all-time high for the first time that cycle, it's always in that first big move that the altcoins that are going to outperform, that are going to be the outliers, the Solanas, the Phantoms, the Lunas, whatever they are, that's where they make that absolutely massive breakout. But historically speaking, we still have even more upside to come after that because if we're going to be following a normal right translated cycle, peaking at the end of 2025, I'm anticipating that a lot of these altcoins are going to absolutely, make 2025 a huge year for them. So we want to be doing our part by not completely exiting out. If we are lucky enough to be holding some of those outperformers at the beginning of the cycle, we don't want to be taking all of our profit like what I did because I screwed up massively. We want to be taking a little bit of profit, guaranteeing that we have that profit because, if you're up a lot of money, 20, 40, 50, 100x, at that point, you can't really beat yourself up for taking profit, even if it ends up going up another 10x from that point. Yeah, 1000x is great, life-changing, but so is a 20x, so is a 40x, so is a 100x. Those are all absolutely massive multiples that most people only dream of. So I think that this cycle is going to be the same, but what I'm personally doing is I'm looking to just hold right now. I don't give a crap that the market is down. in the same ways I didn't give a crap that the market was down in the last cycle when I was accumulating all this stuff. It's a process that we have to go through. It's not going to be such an easy black and white example, but the truth is, if you have the patience to be willing to hold through the hard parts when we're looking at these altcoins doing these type of things, you're going to be the guy that makes the profit, because it's when you're getting freaked out. Oh no, the market is down. Oh no, the stock market is down. I better, sell everything and rush to cash. Well, you just cost yourself a higher tax bracket. You're now, instead of 20% capital gains, you're back to the 30% threshold. The market is pumping and proved you wrong. So you didn't actually gain anything by doing that. So for me, the best strategy, considering most people don't even know how to trade, I'm not even that great of a trader realistically. I just understand how the cycles have played out, and I understand how to do certain research into coins. And a lot of my research comes from piggybacking off of what other people that I know are smarter than me are doing. And you guys should be looking to do the same thing, because many of you guys are even at a lesser point where you might have only been into crypto for a year or 2 years, 3-4 years. I only know what I know because I followed people that were really smart, that understood things, and then I just gathered the most vital points of what I get, the most important points from them, and then I just implemented that into my strategy. I don't follow a lot of people. I follow less than 300 people on Twitter, and realistically, there's maybe 10 that I follow that I actually think have like very vital information to share. The rest of the people I'm just friends with and things like that. And so when we're looking at this cycle, nothing up to this point has been very different. We're looking at almost the exact same similarities where altcoins have lagged. They haven't done anything. Bitcoin is still below prior all-time highs. But I'm telling you guys right now, once Bitcoin makes that first leg up into price discovery, we get that new all-time high move. It's at that point that we're going to see whichever altcoins that are going to run this cycle are going to absolutely massively outperform everything else. They're going to make the Terra Luna fractal where it breaks out, goes up 20, 50x in one big move. And then we're going to have that pullback, that midway correction to begin our cycle. That probably happens after the election year where, we have this big buy the rumor, sell the news. Oh, Trump's pro Bitcoin. Kamala Harris is pro Bitcoin. It doesn't matter who wins. We're going to have good laws for the first time. We're going to see that end up being kind of the sell the news type of event. Everything pulls back. And then from that pullback, we have an opportunity to recompound in those gains. We can reaccumulate to that same portfolio. If you're going to take profits and you end up holding something that does that 20, 40, 50x move in that first breakout, like, what I just mapped out with Terra Luna and Phantom, if you're holding one of those altcoins and you take profit, I would really advise that you put a little bit of that profit away, but I would take some of that and compound back into that dip. And the best thing that you can do is probably just hold and not take any profits and just wait until the latter end of the cycle. Now, it's easier said than done. I've had altcoins that, I bought in early and I watched them make a big correction, and they didn't really make as big of a move into price discovery that I was anticipating. And so it's kind of the risk that you play. But for me personally, every time I've ever been early to an altcoin that makes that big breakout when Bitcoin first goes into new all-time highs, it has always gone into a further new all-time high. And if I would have just had the patience to just continue to focus on that 4-year cycle, looking at the end of 2025 as our top, I would have made way more money. And this is, arguably the last cycle that we have, guys. We might not have any more bull runs like this. And I don't think we will. If I'm giving you guys my blunt, honest truth, I truly do not believe that we're ever going to see as bullish of a market cycle as what this one will be. This is going to be the last time that we have a great opportunity to make life-changing money off of altcoin markets, off of meme coins, off NFTs. The fact that we're even seeing meme coins talked about so early into a cycle shows there's a lot of funny money in participating in this market. It's going to be a euphoric cycle. And so the best thing that we can do is look to maximize the fullest potential of that. If we're talking this being the last true altcoin cycle before we get to a point where, after the internet bubble, if you take that as an example, everything rallied in the internet bubble. We had all of this adoption, all of this new technology, all of this, retail involvement that was coming in. Pets.com was like the highest performing stock during that period, but everything was kind of going up, right? There was just so much hype around the markets. I believe that that's what this cycle is for crypto. But if you're also looking at what happened after the top of that internet bubble, 95, 98% of everything went to zero, crashed, never to return to prior form. And then you had like the Apples, Alphabet, you had the Googles, you had PayPal, some of these other companies at that time, they went up into new cycles, but they were outliers. They no longer followed the same type of hypes trends. They ended up just kind of going up indefinitely. A lot of that has to do with the fact we just keep printing more money. But regardless, that's what's going to happen with crypto. You're going to have a handful of altcoins that are going to stick around, that are going to actually maintain adoption leading into further, 5-10 years from now. It's going to be a very small amount of those cryptos. So if we have it in mind where this cycle is the last one that we can really use to just make that life-changing wealth, get our families out of debt, get ourselves out of debt, buy a house for the first time, whatever it is, take care of your kids. I don't care what it is. This is the cycle to do all of that. But we have to make sure that we're taking profits and we're selling at the end point of this bull run being, the end of 2025, where our projected cycle top is going to be. If we do those things, this is the one opportunity we have to really make it, in my opinion. And that's what I'm doing. That's what I've got my family doing, because the next bear market coming is going to be that huge collapse where people are just going to absolutely get wrecked. They're going to lose their asses, and it's going to be tough to watch. If you're one of the people that didn't sell, you're going to hate yourself, and it's going to absolutely suck knowing how much money you had at the top, knowing how much money you could have had and how much little you have now. You might be sitting at a loss from your initial investment, and you will be if you hold through the bear market. So regardless of your strategy, if it's to take profit in that first big breakout, you're up 20, 40, 50x and you take profit, good on you. You just won. You're outperforming the vast majority of the market. Pat yourself on the back, because even if it goes higher, it does not matter at all. However, understanding, keep a little bag, that you have in those positions that have outperformed, understanding that if they do this type of a move, like a Terra Luna, like a Phantom, you're guaranteeing that you have some more money left away that you can keep profiting off of. You could take the ultimate risk perspective, and that's hold all the way until the end of 2025, or at least like mid to end of 2025 to just play it safe. That's a little bit more along the lines of what I'm doing. I'm not saying that I won't take a little bit of profit during that first big breakout, because historically speaking, we should. But I'm going to be looking to actually compound that back into the dip, because every single crypto cycle I've been a part of, we make that first big breakout, we make that sell-off, and it's in that sell-off that leads us to our true cycle top, where if we're compounding in that dip, you might only have 5K, you might only have 50K in your portfolio, whatever it is. If you turn that into like a few $100,000 or multi-hundreds of thousands of dollars, whatever it is, if you're able to compound back into that dip, and then the market does another, 3, 5, 10x from that point, that's where you're hitting that multi-millions of dollars, and you're taking that next big step up in your own portfolio. So these are just things to consider. I've kind of rambled on a lot because I think that this is the most important stuff to understand. I talked about this with a guy that I was helping him with his portfolio, going over profit-taking strategies, going over his portfolio and altcoins he was holding and things like that. So once again, guys, if you do want to end up, asking me these questions, looking at your portfolio, whatever it is, you can email me. I linked it inside of the comment section, where you guys are actually going to be able to go ahead and follow along. If you want me to actually go over your portfolio, look at altcoins you're holding, talk about potentialities for how you could take profit. Everybody's portfolio is different. Some people are 40 years old, 50 years old or more, and they have debt. They have a family they got to take care of. So your profit-taking strategy is going to be a little bit different than somebody like me who's 26 years old and quite literally has nothing inside of their life to worry about. I don't have kids. I don't have a wife or anything like that. But that's what makes it so different for everybody's perspective. How you take profits has a lot to do with your personal situation. So this is my thoughts and perspective. If you guys do want to see any of that, links are in the description to go ahead and find my email address. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on all of these different apps. Just message me. Tell me you want me to go over your portfolio, and we can set up a time for that. But regardless, we're over an hour. I appreciate you guys tuning in here. It's been a great stream. Talked a lot about different altcoins, and I hope that you guys gained some value from this. I'm going to be doing this every single Friday, so count on a new stream every Friday. And you guys can drop in, ask me your questions. But, I overall just like to cover the entirety of the market, because a lot of the stuff I don't get to talk about as much on my normal channel versus what I get to do on stream. So I really do appreciate you guys so much. And I love you, love the support. All the people that are still here supporting, it means a lot to me. And with that being said, guys, I will catch you in the next one. As always, peace out.